Welcome to the Daily Exchange, guys. We're back. We're talking with Alex from Nuggets News, all about the perfect catalyst is about to send Bitcoin flying. We'll see you guys right after this. Welcome back, guys. We've got Alex Saunders from Nuggets News. Welcome back to the Daily Exchange. Alex.
How you going, Fred? Thanks for having me again.
It's good to have you, my man. Good to have you. Now, just a bit of background. You have obviously the most incredible, and I think the biggest portal for cryptocurrency news in Australia, nuggetsnews.com.au. Guys, check it out. Alex just rips it. We've got a little great picture of your site here as well. Recently, you have brought out a documentary as well called Australia, A Coming Financial Crisis, which is, again, talks all about the current state of the global market, whether or not some of the factors obviously how they might affect Bitcoin. And we're talking all about that today as well. If you haven't checked it out, guys, check out the Nuggets News channel right now on YouTube. Jump on, subscribe, check it out. It's where it's at. We've got a great little picture here. I love your channel, by the way. And I loved your video, Alex, that you just brought out, talking all about some of the economic factors that are brewing. And let's get into that. You know, let's talk first about Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think Bitcoin is so valuable?
I think Bitcoin is so valuable because it is different things to different people. It's a really unique asset. So we can talk about what Bitcoin is in Venezuela or Argentina, or what Bitcoin is in China. And then it's something very different to people that are speculating and love trading Bitcoin because of its volatility, you know, in the US or around the world. So we've never before had an asset class that's digitally scarce, and yet it has all these other properties as well. So many things to different people. There's only a limited number of those, and everyone wants a piece of the pie.
Okay, so we're talking a lot about, I think in your video, your most recent videos talked a lot about this as well, some of the economic factors. Now, why are economic factors, do you think, why are they connected to Bitcoin's price? Where do you think the connection is?
At the moment, Bitcoin is breaking out into all-time highs in different countries where they've had their currency eroded and the economy's pretty bad. And what we've found throughout history is that if you don't use sound money, that local currency tends to decrease in value. And now every country is offered gold-pegged currency. So one by one, these fiat currencies are basically becoming worthless. And it started off as, you know, conspiracy theory sort of stuff, people worrying about currencies crashing. And now it's playing out in real time. And any percentage of those people that have sought safety in Bitcoin or gold, you know, they have protected their wealth and they're prospering even in their local country. So it's basically saved their life and put food on the table in some circumstances. Okay,
so do you think Bitcoin, its purpose then is a store of value?
I think it is to some people. Ultimately, over the long time, Bitcoin is a store of value. So the counter argument is people say, well, it went down 85%. It's not a great store of value. But if you zoom out, I think there's only 2 or 3 months in Bitcoin's history in 10 years where you'd be down if you had to bought a little bit each month. So Bitcoin has been an incredible store of value for 97% of the time. And we have to realize that it's volatile. It's trying to grow into this really big asset. And that means it's going to have big ups and downs along the way. So yes, it's a speculative store of value at this stage.
Okay. Now, in your documentary, you talked a lot about the housing bubble that's currently coming up. You talked about Australia's 27 years of growth without a recession. You talked about the historic low interest rates as well, 1.25%. We saw an RBA cut. You can obviously check that out on Finder. We've got a video talking about that. And obviously home loan rates have been going down. There's a lot of interest in that right now. A weakening mining resources sector as well. Where else do you see some of these things playing out in the world right now?
I think Australia is pretty unique. So we're sort of tied to the rest of the world. If that's all churning along and buzzing, then Australia benefits with all its exports, particularly to China and Asia. So if that slows down, we're in a lot of trouble. And mining had been getting weak. And here we have iron ore having a huge increase in price. So Australia's actually really benefited from that. If that had down near the record lows at a time when our economy is slowing and the housing market's turning down, or if it goes back down that way, I think Australia can be in real trouble. And it kind of reminds me of a business that had a bit of a monopoly. We just had such a good ride with China, and we became pretty good at one thing, and now that's all changing, and we're just being way too slow to adapt.
Mm-hmm. And in the world right now, I think in your video you talked a little bit about Argentina. What's going on with Argentina right now? What are some of the factors that are playing out there?
I'm not a political expert in this, but like a lot of places, there's arguments over what they should do with their resources and who's wants controlling the government, and the people aren't getting a fair share of the pie. So, we see hyperinflation starting to take hold there. I think it's up to 50% a year. And once we hit that sort of escape velocity, it tends to go parabolic like we saw in Venezuela, and another country that has a lot of natural resources, but if you don't have a stable economy and a stable money supply, then it's the citizens that suffer. And look how bad it's got in some of these countries where they're having to eat, pets and animals on the street just to survive. It's, we don't want anyone going through that. And if you peel back the layers, often it comes back to the government and the monetary system. And Bitcoin is maybe our best chance to fight this and change this.
Okay. Now, there's also some other things at play here. We've got quantitative easing. We've got US debt rising. We've got some trouble in the Eurozone. We've got high debt in Italy. We've got a graph here, Joel, if you want to bring up. We've also got this Brexit as well, 2.7 trillion, I believe this is something you brought up in your piece as well, in Italy. And what's this doing with the activity in Bitcoin in Italy and Argentina right now?
So if we look at the volumes of people that are buying Bitcoin in Argentina and Venezuela, they're clearly increasing. But then fourth on the list of Bitcoin volume is Italy, which a lot of people would be surprised by. And that's probably the first country that's, a real household name, a tourist destination. Everyone's pretty familiar with Italy. So if something like this starts to happen with a bit of political chaos and people on the streets, or, they start to talk about having their own currency and moving away from the euro or a parallel currency, anything like that, that very quickly makes it real for a lot of people. And they say, geez, if Bitcoin is now in Italy, it's not just in these fringe, developing countries and helping people. And I think that's a massive catalyst.
So with all this sort of, I guess, economic turbulence right now, we're going to talk a bit about gold in a sec as well. We're going to talk a bit about those things. But I want to ask, are we building up to a catalyst for a new bull run with Bitcoin?
I think the catalyst is the same thing that everyone is waiting for, whether we're talking about gold or the stock market or anything. It's all the same catalyst, in that central banks after the GFC told us that everything will be okay. We'll print this money and we'll drop interest rates and we'll get the economy going again to escape velocity, and then we'll normalize everything. And within the past 6 months, they've gone from saying, hey, we're going to unwind that and raise interest rates and sell our bonds, to recently, as this week, saying, okay, rate cuts are back on the table. So we sort of missed a whole cycle. And central banks are now acting like they can control the business cycle, because we shouldn't be scared of a downturn. Like a recession is part of a normal business cycle where we clear out bad businesses and bad debt. Yet here we are 10 or 11 years into this cycle, and they're now talking about doing anything they can to keep the expansion going. Now, with debt at record highs and all this bad, business zombie companies, why is it a good thing to try and keep this going as long as we can and put people into more debt by dropping interest rates? It just doesn't make sense to me. And I think the world is sort of waking up to the facts that, oh, geez, central banks did not have control, and we're about to go through this whole money printing, lower interest rates thing again.
Okay. Now, let's talk about some other factors here. Let's talk about gold and the trade war right now. So let's just give everyone a bit of background. We've got a prolonged trade war with China right now. And obviously taxes on imported goods. We've got check out the Shanghai Index here, Joel. I wonder if you can bring that up. We can see it's pulled back. It was about 3,300 down to 2,850. We've got, that's obviously clearly affected some of the companies. We've got China also taxing US goods back. We've got major swings happening right now in commodities and the S&P 500. I think Citibank just put out a new bit of research saying that we could go into a full full-on bear market, is what they're saying. A full-scale bear market for the S&P 500. Pulling back, you can see that white line at the top there, potentially coming down. Gold is, I believe, also talking a bit about gold, it's just hit a new all-time high in Australia, experiencing 12% growth over the past 12 months to be about $1,900 per ounce. Again, this is, financial markets are spelling something here, Alex. What does all this mean? Where are we heading?
Yeah, I think there's probably two pieces to that puzzle. So with the trade wars, the fact that China and the US are sort of now fighting for world dominance, whether it's, economic superpower, military superpower, they're starting to butt heads, and markets don't like uncertainty. So we're starting to see money go into gold for that safe haven. And if we look at tariffs, if these countries start slapping them on each other, it's all well and good. They feel good about themselves, but all the companies are going to have is lower profits if their costs go up, and that means that share prices and cash flow, that all goes down. But then what do those companies do? They're going to want to put up prices on the end consumer. So it's all the government making these rules, but it's the end user, the consumer, the average guy that can't afford 25% extra on all the goods they're buying that gets hurt the most from all these tariffs.
Okay, now let's talk about this. Okay, so I think what we're just sort of saying is, is Bitcoin, I guess, a safe haven for some of this economic turmoil?
Well, particularly in that case, if there's tariffs and the US and China aren't liking each other, then China has cracked down again on their capital controls. So anywhere where there's going to be more friction getting money from A to B, Bitcoin all of a sudden starts to look like a really attractive option. But again, that's another use case on top of those that we've already spoken about today.
Yep. What about, do you think it has enough maturity as a global store of value?
I think this is the first time, if we get this big catalyst or we just get all these little spot fires, this is the first time when Bitcoin has been an asset for people to park money into. And if you're in one of these countries, you can't exactly buy a lump of gold or silver coins. Most of these people have even basic smartphones where they can keep some Bitcoin or send money around. So Bitcoin is another alternative asset class, whether you're an individual or a big guy in China trying to get a lot of money out of the country.
Got it. Now, what about Bitcoin versus gold? What do you think? Do you think people are so saying, okay, I could buy some gold or I could buy some Bitcoin for some safety? Because traditionally, gold's been seen as, I guess, a hedge against inflation. What do you think about that? Where do you think people's minds or investors are at?
So this is a really touchy subject because a lot of people came into crypto from the gold background about, free money and libertarianism and all that sort of thing. But you have to admit that gold has lost its luster somewhat because there's such huge returns in the crypto markets. And Bitcoin is doing what everyone wanted gold and silver to do, explode higher because of monetary policy and so on. So there's a lot of people my age or younger that are really drawn to crypto that don't find gold that exciting. But having said that, gold is a $7 trillion market. And if you're a big hedge fund with billions or trillions under management, you can't just say, oh, look, we need to put 10% of our portfolio into a safe haven asset this month. The Bitcoin market is too tiny. It's a $100 billion market. You can't park $1 trillion in there. So you can park $1 trillion in the gold market. And that's where I see gold will have its day again when the big money needs to seek some safety.
Now, in the US, we've seen some instability. We've got, I guess, almost interest rate wars with China and the Fed happening here. We've got low rates again with the Australian dollar. It's putting, and potentially the Fed going up might put pressure on the Australian dollar again. Australian rates going down. Maybe this change in interest rate policy by the Fed. It might even be getting put global pressure on because obviously there are other markets that are pegged towards the US interest rate and US dollar. Do you think there's instability in the US, which might again lead to a catalyst with Bitcoin?
I think it's a very interesting scenario because there's a lot of developing nations that have a lot of US dollar debt. And if the US starts dropping rates again, then it creates this really interesting dynamic. It's called the milkshake theory. And take Australia, for example, if we go into a recession, one of the only things that could save us is getting the Aussie dollar really low to bump up our exports and making it a really favorable tourist destination. But if the US are going back down that path and dropping interest rates to zero and they're also heading into recession, then that gets into that situation where everyone is racing to the bottom. Everyone wants to have a weaker currency. And so what does Australia have to go to, minus 3% interest rates as they normally cut 5% in a recession? So it's pretty worrying stuff to think about where this all ends up when there's a race to the bottom who can lower their currency the fastest.
Makes sense. Alex, it's very interesting times, this economic turbulence right now. Do you think altcoins will also respond just as much as Bitcoin?
I think every cycle is different. So there's been a number of altcoin cycles. Obviously, the biggest was 2017. What we've seen so far is that the top 10 or 20 assets have been really attractive for people. Again, it's that sort of the bigger, smarter money that's starting to creep into Bitcoin. And then there's these other investment products, the big cap coins, but they don't have investment products. There's not good liquidity. They're not on good exchanges, all these really low cap coins. So I think you've got to be very, very selective. And we've always said that 99% of those coins are going to fail. So we're trying to pick projects that are going to be used in the real world. So there's going to be another altcoin cycle at some point, but it's probably not going to be everything goes up like 2017.
Makes sense. All right, Alex, wrapping up, obviously, guys, do check out Alex's channel. He's bringing out some great economic videos right now. It's incredible stuff at Nuggets News there. I'm going to ask you finally, what do you think the price of Bitcoin will be in US dollars at New Year's Eve this year, 2019, the price of Bitcoin? What do you reckon it's going to be?
I don't think we made new all-time highs this year, but I think we're higher than where we are today at 7,000. So yeah, somewhere around the $10,000 mark would be my guess. But it's all about that 2020 halving event where I think we're going to see a steep increase and a lot of excitement.
All right. Alex, thank you so much for joining us on the Daily Exchange. Guys, do follow Alex's channel and get into it and check out his documentary as well. It's incredible stuff, and appreciate you joining us on the Daily Exchange.
Thanks a lot, Fred. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, do subscribe and do follow us. We'll bring you more of these great guests telling you all about the next up-and-coming market for Bitcoin. And we might have a little special surprise guest on the show as well. See you guys later. Yeah.